supreme, profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Now we'll continue our study on the second chapter of the Bodhicharyavatara. In this section of the text, we are focusing on the practice of ownerless things. Yesterday we already discussed making offerings to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and 3 times, as well as the Dharma and the Sangha, such as flowers, medicines, all kinds of worldly jewels, various precious stones, and pure water, among other things. Today, we'll continue with this topic. The verse reads, "Mountains of jewels and likewise forest groves in solitary and delightful places, bushes adorned with ornamental flowers, and trees whose branches bow with splendid fruit." The commentary explains this as follows: towering and majestic mountains of jewels and precious mountains, peaceful and delightful forests, free from clamor and confusion, exquisitely adorned with beautiful flowers, and wondrous trees with branches weighed down by abundant fruit. Here, several types of offerings are mentioned: jeweled mountains, forests, fruit trees, and flowering trees. First, let's talk about the majestic mountains of jewels. According to the Abhidharmakosha, in our world there is Mount Meru, which is made of 4 kinds of precious jewels, along with the 7 golden mountain ranges surrounding it and the ring of iron mountains. All these majestic mountains made of precious substances we should offer before the 3 jewels. So we should offer them in our minds to the 3 jewels. Furthermore, besides these legendary and jeweled mountains, there are also many real mountains in our world, and for example, Mount Everest, the world's highest peak, or the towering Himalayas that we often hear about. Also, in the Han Chinese regions, there are the 4 sacred Buddhist mountains where the 4 great bodhisattvas reside, as well as Mount Hua, Mount Tai, the Kunlun Mountains, and so on. All these famous mountains in the world can be offered in this way. The Andes, for instance, is the longest mountain range in the world, stretching across or passing through 7 countries. These are the world's highest and longest mountain ranges. As for the most beautiful mountain, many now consider Kawa Karpo, or Meili Snow Mountain, to hold that title, which is in Yunnan near Shangri-La, close to the border with Tibet region. Some people say the scenery there is truly breathtaking. In any case, as practitioners, whether or not we have the chance to visit these places for pilgrimage or sightseeing is not always certain. For many practitioners, after studying the Dharma and truly understanding its meaning, the desire to travel and wander about often fades away. That urge to roam is almost completely gone. Many people become more interested in focused study and inner reflection. They find this much more meaningful. But there are also some people who, through various circumstances or because their interests and inclinations differ, may still have opportunities to visit these famous mountains, not just for sightseeing, but also to experience their unique atmosphere and beauty. When you find yourself in such places, it's very common nowadays for people to take out their cameras and snap photos as soon as they see a beautiful mountain or landscape. That's perfectly fine, especially when you're surrounded by such breathtaking scenery. It's natural to want to enjoy it. But as a Mahayana Buddhist who follows the instructions of the Dharma, the most important thing is that whether you see these mountains, hear about them, or even just recall them in your mind, in all these situations you must make a mental offering. Bring their images to your mind and offer them. Just as we mentioned earlier, the majestic mountains of jewels should also be offered in this way. Even if there are no actual mountains of jewels, especially now in summer, you may see many mountains that aren't particularly famous. Whether in Tibetan regions or elsewhere, you'll often come across many mountain ranges. At those times, you should immediately think to offer them to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions. If you make offerings in this way, the merit is truly vast. This is something we should never neglect in our daily lives or practice. It's an essential part of our path. At the same time, this section also mentions peaceful, undisturbed, and very tranquil sacred mountains and forests. There are still many forests in the world today. Biruku Dayindu de Chenxianglin, Tanxianglin, for example, the ancient agarwood and sandalwood forests of India, as well as many other precious trees. Even today, for example, there's a Zhishuangbana in Yunnan, or the forests in the Changbai Mountains. These are also quite beautiful. His Holiness also spoke of this before. Near our western mountain, where the goddess of the trees resides, there's a small forest that's very beautiful, especially in the spring. Walking into that little forest is a truly delightful experience. But now that area has already been set aside for the nuns, so generally male monastics are not permitted to go there. His Holiness shared this story with us while he was still alive. Patrul Rinpoche once said that the kind of delightful forest described in the Bodhicharyavatara should be like the forest in Qinghai, with its lush greenery and tranquil beauty, the one on the border between Qinghai and Sichuan. When we went on pilgrimage to the birthplace of His Holiness, we also passed through that very forest. Patrul Rinpoche would often say that the peaceful forest described in the Bodhicharyavatara should be just like the forests of Arik. No matter where we are, whenever we come across pine forests, banyan trees, agarwood groves, or any kind of woodland, we should take a moment to visualize in our minds. Whether we do this through visualization or mental offering, we should then offer these forests to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions. At the same time, there are also jeweled trees adorned with all kinds of flowers, or even the fruit trees we see today, apple trees, pear trees, and so on, heavy with fruit. Whether these are in someone's garden or in an orchard, whenever you see trees blossoming or bearing fruit at that time, you should remind yourself, these fruit trees are so beautiful. I should immediately offer them to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions. This is a form of mental offering, and the merit from this is truly immense. In daily life, it's not just forests or jeweled mountains, even when we're traveling and see winding streams, green hills, or picturesque, beautiful villages. Whenever we encounter scenery that delights us, as long as we ourselves find it quite pleasing and beautiful, our first thought should be, oh, this is so beautiful. I must offer it to the 3 jewels. You can say this aloud or simply visualize it in your mind. In this way, our accumulation of merit will naturally be fulfilled. So as practitioners, really, sometimes it's not necessary to give away large sums of money, nor should we think that if we don't have money, we can't accumulate merit. That's not the case at all, especially for yogis or those with higher realization. For them, all appearances are really no different from actual material things. On one hand, their power of visualization is very strong. On the other, they are not attached to external wealth or treasures. For example, when Guru Padmasambhava first arrived in Tibet, King Trisong Detsen offered Guru Padmasambhava a great deal of gold to repay his kindness in transmitting the Dharma. He offered a vast amount of gold. While he was offering this gold, Guru Padmasambhava sang a Vajra song saying, "Everything I see is a world of gold. I have no need for this little bit of gold from you." This is recorded in the extensive biography of Guru Padmasambhava. Truly, some people with excellent practice have no such clinging. We ordinary people might be especially attached to gold, silver, and treasures, thinking, this is silver, this is gold, I must hold on to this tightly, this is just a stone, this is wood, these are useless to me. This kind of attachment can be very strong. But for true yogis, for those with some realization, they don't have such distinctions in their minds. From this perspective, they have no grasping at external things. So the offerings we make with our minds are actually no different. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are fully able to receive them. From the perspective of worldly objects, we can also make offerings in this way. The following verse says, "Incense and perfumes as from divine worlds," and so forth, wish-fulfilling trees, jewel trees, and crops that grow without need to be plowed, all ornaments that are fit to be offered, and lakes and pools bedecked with lotuses, where lovely swans have most delightful calls. When explaining this verse, it says, fragrant aromas blended in the celestial realms and elsewhere, perfumes such as agar wood and so forth, wish-fulfilling trees that satisfy all needs, and wondrous trees formed of rare and precious jewels, crops that grow naturally without cultivation, as well as all other precious ornaments worthy of offering, including lakes adorned with lotus flowers, and the continuous, delightfully melodious calls of swans in ponds. These are the general meanings in the verse. Let me summarize the essential points for you. First, in our world, there are all kinds of precious incenses for burning, aromatic incenses, anointing perfumes, and so on, each giving off its own unique fragrance. We should also remember to visualize these in our minds. In nature, there are so many, for example, agar wood, sandalwood, clove, and so forth. Some are man-made blends created through mixing and synthesis, while others are naturally occurring. For instance, in summer, many flowers naturally fill the air with a variety of wonderful fragrances, each unique and delightful in its own way. We should also think in this way, whether in the human world, the heavens, or the Naga palaces, all the delightful fragrances in the world should be visualized as offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. As for wish-fulfilling trees, we've often talked about these before. In ancient times, when people's merit was especially great, there were wish-fulfilling trees that appeared due to the merit of sentient beings. In the heaven of the 33, there are also wish-fulfilling trees arising from virtuous karma. We should also visualize offering these wish-fulfilling trees. If we don't see such wish-fulfilling trees in real life, there are still many trees in the world, like cypress and pine trees that we can see, as well as sandalwood and all kinds of tall, majestic trees. When you see these trees, your first thought should be, these trees are so beautiful, I must offer them. Especially when you're riding in a car, you'll often see rows and rows of great trees passing quickly by the roadside, sliding past your eyes in an instant. At those moments, remember to offer them to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Keep training your mind in this way again and again. Long ago, at the beginning of the Kalpa, there were naturally growing crops in the world that needed no cultivation. Or in Uttarakuru, there are also crops that grow naturally due to the merit of beings. These natural crops as well, we should visualize offering them to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, if nowadays there aren't actual natural crops that haven't been cultivated. Normally what we see before us are rice paddies, wheat fields, or corn fields. Vast, boundless fields filled with all kinds of grains and crops. Especially in autumn, when the breeze blows, it's like golden waves continuously rolling and undulating. It's especially beautiful. Whether in summer, spring, or autumn, the fields are constantly changing into different colors. These kinds of scenes, generally, whether when riding in vehicles or going places, we can often see them, especially in places like Xinjiang or the northeast, where the fields are particularly vast. At those times, if you have the power of visualization, offer all these scenes before you to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The merit from this is, of course, quite great. At the same time, here it also speaks of lakes adorned and decorated with various colors, white, red, yellow, and so forth. In the world, there are quite a few famous lakes. For example, Dongting Lake, Chao Lake, Poyang Lake, and many others. There's also West Lake in Hangzhou. But regarding West Lake in Hangzhou, I recently read a geography magazine that featured a ranking of many famous lakes from around the world. In the ranking of these lakes, it came in 5th place. First place should be Qinghai Lake. Qinghai Lake was also very famous in ancient times. When people praise it, they describe it's like a sea of turquoise or jade, shimmering with incredible beauty. Many poets have different words for its beauty, expressing their admiration. So first is Qinghai Lake. Second is Kanas Lake in Xinjiang. Kanas Lake, 2 years ago, I really wanted to go, but I didn't make it. Third should be Lake Namtso near Lhasa, which is also extremely highly regarded. 4th place is Heaven Lake in the Chiangbai Mountains. 5th is West Lake in Hangzhou. So perhaps the people of Hangzhou won't be too happy hearing this, but I didn't create this ranking. So indeed, after seeing these lakes, everyone may have their different feelings, but it's always a deeply refreshing and moving experience. Therefore, when we see them, we think, oh, this scenery is so beautiful. Take my picture here, take my picture there, never thinking to offer them to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. If this is the case from now on, I think we could approach it with a different mindset. Many people often have opportunities to see especially beautiful scenery, whether in daily life or while traveling. Sometimes we go to famous historical sites, or sometimes to such sacred places. There are many opportunities, but most regrettably, they've never visualized offering them to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The other day, I heard about someone who has been on pilgrimages everywhere throughout his life. Basically, of most of the famous places in China, there's nowhere he hasn't been. He's been to them all. By the time he was in his 30s or 40s, he'd been everywhere. but probably not even once did he make such an aspiration. Sometimes this seems quite regrettable. The feeling you have after going may be different from not going at all. After personally visiting Westlake in Hangzhou, you'll have a different feeling. When His Holiness went to Hangzhou one day when we were taking photos there, he said, Westlake in Hangzhou is very famous, but indeed after seeing it, there is a different feeling. At that time, His Holiness praised the West Lake in this way. So I think after going, you also have a different feeling. But have we made such aspirations to offer to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? I'm afraid many people haven't thought about this. When His Holiness taught the Bodhicharyavatara, he also said this: it's not just these ponds, lakes, and rivers that we should visualize as offerings, but also all the bodies of water in our world today, the Arctic Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, and so forth. These great oceans we should also visualize and offer in our minds. If we're flying over these vast oceans, we should also visualize offering them to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in our minds. Visualizing in this way actually has very great merit. Our ordinary material possessions, sometimes because of miserliness, we find it hard to let go and make offerings. And sometimes when we do offer, they don't have that much value. Think about it. A mountain range. If we wanted to buy it at current prices, how much would it cost? But do we really have the means to do that? Of course not. Not to mention buying all of the Kunlun mountains. Even buying Mount Ngala Tagse would be quite difficult for most people. So I think whenever we have the chance to see such beautiful sights, our first thought should be to offer them to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, to offer them to the three jewels. Having such a thought is extremely important. At the same time, concerning these lakes, it also says here that there are very beautiful swans, and the swans make delightful melodious sounds. After hearing these sounds, people feel very comfortable in their hearts, because generally speaking, among birds, swans should be considered one of the most beautiful. Especially in India and the Tibetan regions, many poets, scholars, and writers often use swans as metaphors in their works to praise the beautiful, melodious sounds of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the three jewels. There are many such praises written in their literature. So in our daily lives, whenever we hear the beautiful sound of swans, we can also think of offering it to the three jewels in our minds. Not only in the Tibetan regions and India do people regard swans highly, but nowadays internationally in many works, people who have a deep love for music sometimes mention works related to swans, such as Swan Lake and The Dying Swan, which are often cherished by many. There are countless musical pieces in the world, and many renowned figures have used swans as metaphors in their works and praises. In many lakes across the Tibetan region, you can find white swans. As Khenpo Kunpal once described, there are not only silvery white and pure white swans, but also swans as red as coral, golden yellow swans, and even those as blue as sapphires, swans of all different colors. His Holiness also mentioned this before, that by the small rivers near our academy, a flock of yellow swans would often appear. He said that especially in summer, they would come quite frequently. So when we visualize in this way, we visualize that in these beautiful lakes, there are swans of many colors, all singing their melodious songs. At that moment, you naturally feel a special feeling of joy and delight. All these beautiful and melodious sounds can be offered to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in all directions. This is how we can visualize. Swans are not just birds with beautiful voices. They are also used in literature as symbols for people, and works inspired by swans often carry deep educational meaning. For example, long ago in Denmark, there was Hans Christian Andersen, who wrote a very famous fairy tale. I'm sure you all know it, The Ugly Duckling. The story is quite fascinating and captivating, and it goes roughly like this. The mother swan didn't take good care of her chick, so the little swan ended up among a group of ducklings. In the beginning, the little swan was gray and not very attractive, and the ducklings would often tease and bully it, saying, "Look how beautiful we are, but you're so ugly." But as time went on, the little swan grew more and more beautiful. And when it finally became so beautiful, the other ducklings felt embarrassed. The meaning is that the ugly duckling eventually transformed into a beautiful white swan. The story is a metaphor. Even if we don't do well in school or aren't good looking, and maybe at first we are looked down upon or even bullied by others, over time we can grow and change. And when that happens, others won't dare to bully us anymore. This is a worldly story that uses the swan as a metaphor to teach a lesson about life. Anyway, the sound of swans is truly beautiful and uplifting. Hearing the sound of swans on a beautiful lake or the melodious calls of other birds brings a special kind of happiness. Recently I heard the sound of a cuckoo and felt very happy. Especially this time, I heard it one morning while reciting prayers, and it gave me a different feeling. Here, we often like to observe auspicious signs. For example, whatever you're doing when you first hear a cuckoo, that's how your year will go. There's such a tradition. If you're hungry when you hear it, you might be hungry all year. So people say. So recently, when I heard the cuckoo, I happened to be reciting prayers. I thought, maybe this year I should practice well. But who knows? Sometimes these folk beliefs turn out to be the opposite. Maybe this year I'll be very hungry after all. Who can say? That's just how it is. In any case, all the things we've just talked about, no matter what they are, whether it's magnificent mountains and rivers, lakes, beautiful fields and gardens, or grand palaces and halls, all the sights that we encounter, we should offer them wholeheartedly to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in all directions. In the past, many Chan masters in China would often use the spring breeze, summer flowers, the bright autumn moon, or the white snow of winter as metaphors or as praises for the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or to praise environments that are peaceful, pleasant, and comfortable. We can do the same. Take all the natural beauty of spring, summer, autumn, and winter, and bring all this beauty into our hearts, mentally gathering these offerings and dedicating them to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in all directions. In short, at any time, whenever you see something pleasing, just as it says in the words of my perfect teacher, even if you see a handsome man or a beautiful woman, your first thought should be, oh, this person is beautiful, and immediately say out loud, I offer this to the three jewels. Yes, this is exactly what the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have taught us. So no matter where we are, in whatever setting or environment, whenever we encounter something pleasing, our first thought should be to offer it to the Guru and the three jewels. If we do this, then even without much effort, we can accumulate a great deal of merit along the way. This is real practice. Practice doesn't always mean sitting cross-legged on a meditation cushion with your hands in a mudra. It's about integrating your practice into every moment, day and night, bringing your spiritual path into your daily life. That is, to always keep the three jewels in mind. Never let that mindfulness slip away. This is the way of a truly excellent practitioner. I hope you'll put effort into this. At first it might feel a bit difficult because we have many old habits and haven't trained ourselves in this way before. So changing all at once might be a challenge, but I don't think it's too hard really. The next verse says, everything that's unowned extending to the edges of the realms of infinite space. I imagine taking these and offer them well to the sages, greatest of beings and their offspring. Sublime and greatly compassionate recipients, think of me lovingly, accept these from me. The commentary says, all such things as these, in the vast, boundless realms of space. In Pure Lands, as well as in Uttarakuru and other places, all ownerless things, I take them all through mental visualization. Take them all through your mind's visualization. I pray to offer them to the supreme field of merit, which brings about the greatest results. May they accept these for the benefit of all sentient beings. I sincerely beseech the greatly compassionate ones to look upon me with loving kindness and accept my offerings. This is the way we should think in our hearts. In summary, earlier we gave some representative examples from nature, such as mountains and rivers, seashores, forests, flowers, beautiful sounds, and so on. All of these, whether in the human realm, the celestial realms, the realms of Rakshasas, Yakshas, and so forth, all the offerings found throughout the vast, boundless universe, we should gather and visualize them all in our minds. After visualizing, we should recall the most supreme field of merit in our world, namely Buddha Shakyamuni and his disciples, Mahayana Sangha. We then make offerings to this Sangha one by one. To make offerings to them in this way brings great virtue and benefit. It's just like the story of King Mandatri that we've heard before. Everyone knows his story. He received tremendous benefit in return for a simple offering. There are many such stories. The merit of making offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is truly vast. After making these offerings, we should reflect, in this life, I have encountered such a supreme field of merit. I am truly very fortunate. Keep this in your heart. Now, when making offerings, we should also have the 6 conditions for offering that Tokme Zangpo explained earlier. Or, as the Indian master Asanga explained in the Bodhisattva Bhumi chapter of the Yogacara Bhumi, there are also 6 conditions. The first is to recognize that the 3 jewels possess supreme qualities. This is how to contemplate the first condition. The 3 jewels possess supreme qualities. This is the first. Second, we should understand that the 3 jewels can bring us boundless benefit. This is the second condition. Keep this in mind. The third, among all sentient beings, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are the most supreme. This is how to contemplate the third. Fourth, the 3 jewels are like the Udumbara flower, extremely rare and difficult to encounter in this world. This is how to contemplate the fourth. Fifth, in the entire 3,000 great thousand worlds, the 3 jewels are unique. Make offerings with this understanding. Sixth, we should also contemplate this. The 3 jewels are the source of all worldly and transcendent qualities. When we make offerings, we should have these 6 conditions, or the 6 conditions Tokme Zangpo explained earlier, which we discussed in yesterday's teaching. Those are also fine. Or we can use the 6 conditions that Asanga explained in the Bodhisattva Bhumi chapter of the Yogacara Bhumi. Normally, whether we're at a temple or before the Sangha, when making offerings, I feel that many people may not fully possess these conditions for offering. Most people make offerings with the wish, may I have peace and safety, may everything go smoothly for me, making aspirations like this. Of course, if you encounter obstacles or difficulties, you immediately go to a temple to burn incense and make offerings to the Buddha and pray before the Buddha in this way. Does it bring benefit? Does it help? Apart from certain irreversible karmas from past lives, of course it does. So I'm not saying that when making any offering, you must only do it for the benefit of sentient beings and never for yourself. That's not what I mean, because every sentient being's needs are different. The 3 jewels are the source of supreme qualities, and since they are the source of supreme qualities, they can fulfill many of our wishes. Through the 100 deeds and other Buddhist scriptures, we can see that when the Buddha was in the world, there were many patrons, Brahmins and kings, whose requests before the 3 jewels were all different. Some prayed for children because they had none. Some farmers prayed for rain before the 3 jewels when there was drought, and some who were very poor prayed for wealth. There were such cases too. As for the 3 jewels, unless someone has extremely heavy karma, as long as you make request before the 3 jewels will certainly grant you such accomplishments. Therefore, before such excellent and supreme fields of merit, everyone should think this way. I have now encountered such an excellent and supreme field of merit. I will make excellent offerings before the 3 jewels and hope the 3 jewels will grant me blessings and accept my offerings. Visualize in this way. The following verse addresses the second point. Section 2. The reason for making these offerings above, we explained making offerings of ownerless things. So what is the reason for making offerings in this way? The following verse explains, I am bereft of merit, destitute, and have no other wealth that I could offer. May the protectors who think of others' weal accept these through their power for my sake. Someone might ask, why don't you offer your own possessions, but instead offer these ownerless things? You're not willing to part with even a penny of your own, yet you want to offer mountains, rivers, oceans, and lakes that have nothing to do with you, things that cost you nothing at all. So what's the point of offerings like this? Just like some people nowadays who won't part with a single penny, when you mention making offerings, they say, no, mental offerings are fine, visualized offerings are fine. So what about this approach? Let me explain the reason. Because in the past, I did not accumulate merit and am extremely poor. Aside from these offerings, I truly have no other material possessions to offer. Of course, if someone truly has nothing to offer, then such offerings are appropriate. But even if someone does have something to offer, as we just discussed, things like the entire Mount Meru or all the oceans and lakes of the 4 continents, these I couldn't possibly buy with money. These things simply can't be bought. Even if you could, in this life, you wouldn't have the fortune for it. You didn't accumulate the merit in past lives. In ancient times, great wheel-turning kings and powerful rulers had that kind of merit. But no matter how wealthy we are today, we simply don't have that kind of good fortune. I've met some wealthy business owners from Hong Kong or the South who think of themselves as extremely rich. They say, I'll buy this mountain. But in reality, it's just a small hill. They feel, why, I've bought this whole mountain, I paid for it myself. But in our current age of Dharma decline, no matter how much merit you have, it's just a few hundred acres. The land is not that vast. So when we visualize offerings in our minds, the scale is so much greater, and there really is a difference. We truly don't have those kinds of possessions. I sincerely wish to make offerings to you. I pray that the protectors who think only of benefiting others will accept all these offerings for my sake, the one making the offering. We can also reflect in this way. Actually, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, as it says in the Medicine Buddha Sutra, do not lack these material things and have no need for them. It's not that by making offerings they receive some great benefit. That's not the case. So why do we make offerings? Although the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have perfected all qualities and have no need for these things, when we make offerings in this way, on one hand, it helps us to overcome our own stinginess and attachment. On the other hand, by relying on this method to make offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, the accumulations of merit and wisdom in our own mind streams can be quickly completed. This is the benefit. So we should think, all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, today I am visualizing and making these vast offerings. Please, with your various miraculous powers, accept all the offerings I am making. Visualize in this way. If we don't have these visualized offerings and only offer a little money or a few small things, to actually make offerings before all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, from our own perspective, these offerings would probably be far from enough. So when we make offerings with such abundance in our minds, with such visualization, the merit and virtue we accumulate will be truly vast. Now, some people might wonder, is this kind of offering a special teaching unique to Tibetan Buddhism, or is it actually recorded in the Buddhist sutras? They might wonder about this. Actually, the principles that Shantideva explained are mostly scriptural citations from the Compendium of Training. For example, in the Sutra on Skill in Means, it is recorded that the Buddha told the great bodhisattvas, a bodhisattva who possesses skillful means uses wisdom to gather all the flowers, garlands, fine incense, perfumes, mountains, rivers, land, and so on throughout the 10 directions, all these wonderful, ownerless offerings, and offers them all to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout the 10 directions. This is also recorded in the Sutra on Skillful Means. So, the method of visualizing ownerless offerings is not just a special teaching of Tibetan Buddhism or a few Indian masters. In fact, Buddha Shakyamuni himself in the Mahayana tradition also taught this directly. The Jewel Cloud Sutra also says the same thing. The Buddha told his disciples, noble sons, in the 3,000 great thousand worlds, all the flowers, fruits, and so on, all these wonderful ownerless offerings should all be gathered in your mind, visualized with your mind. Then 3 times during the day and 3 times at night, that is during the 6 periods of day and night, make offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions. In this way, there will be immeasurable merit, and you should dedicate this merit to all sentient beings. So, through the Jewel Cloud Sutra and the Sutra on Skillful Means, when we look at the principles in these Mahayana sutras, it's easy for us to understand. Understand what? That offerings of ownerless things are definitely part of the most profound intent of Buddha Shakyamuni's Mahayana teachings. So, in our daily lives, we should definitely make offerings in this way. Of course, in the process of making offerings, there's a situation in the world nowadays, as I just mentioned. Just visualize in your mind, that's enough. Rejoicing is enough. Mental offerings are enough. But actually, when you really ask them to make offerings, even before the Buddha statue at home, they don't have the generosity to offer even a butter lamp and are unwilling to offer even a stick of incense. Some people speak very beautifully. Everything is ultimately emptiness. We must practice great compassion. But actually, for example, when it comes to liberating animals, they can't even bring themselves to spend the money to save a single life. They're just not willing to give. You could put it that way. Once I saw someone who was said to be a big boss, worth several hundred million yuan. He said, "We're going to liberate animals. Let's do that." I was very happy, thinking he would surely buy many animals. But the next day, when it was actually time to liberate animals, he only spent 100 yuan on those animals. Generally speaking, out of several hundred million. Giving 100 yuan is, relatively speaking, really not very much at all. But sometimes people's capacities and level of maturity are different, of course. In the past, some people in our community, I think I wrote about this in my journal, some people at the academy didn't even have enough to eat, yet they donated all their money to liberate animals. There were such cases. Of course, our powers of wisdom, faith, and compassion are all different. In general, our spiritual progress isn't achieved just by saying nice-sounding words. That's not a real solution. Although the Buddhist sutras do say the merit of rejoicing is equal to that of actually performing the virtuous deed, and that mental offerings can even surpass ordinary material offerings. There are such statements, but as we just discussed in the verse, the real meaning is that when you truly have no means, when you are genuinely poor, whether you are a monastic or a lay Buddhist, if you really have nothing to offer, and feel that before the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions or before your guru, you truly have no means to make offerings, then you can visualize making offerings in your mind. But if you clearly have the means, yet make no offerings at all, and only speak beautifully about it, well, I don't know what to say about that. If you're a wealthy person and go to your guru and you say, Guru, I'm going to offer you the Pacific Ocean, West Lake in Hangzhou, and all kinds of mountains, rivers, and lands. If you say things like that, I really don't know what your guru would think. Honestly, I'm not sure either. But generally speaking, when making offerings before the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, it's important to rely on your own faith and ability. This is very important. If you have no faith at all, of course, as for these offerings for true gurus and spiritual teachers, they themselves will not be attached to such material offerings. If a guru is attached to such things, it means they don't truly have the qualities of a Mahayana spiritual guide. A while ago, didn't we explain the qualities of a Mahayana spiritual guide? It never says, this guru loves wealth and riches. There's no such teaching or statement. The characteristics of a Mahayana teacher are that they never abandon the Mahayana Dharma, even at the risk of their lives, and that they are thoroughly versed in the Mahayana scriptures. These are the true qualities of a Mahayana spiritual teacher. In this degenerated age, it's true that it can be very hard to tell genuine spiritual teachers from those who are not authentic. So in such times, I believe that as Buddhists, we need to stay clear-headed and observe carefully before making any decisions. Only after you've truly recognized a teacher who possesses the authentic qualities, then you make offerings to them. This is a better approach. Otherwise, I'm afraid you may end up feeling disappointed in the end. You won't gain merit, and you'll be disappointed. So generally, if you don't really know someone, or if someone new arrives and you offer things to them without much thought, then regret it afterward. That's actually not very important. If you truly want to make offerings, actually, Dharma offerings, making Dharma offerings first is best. For a genuine teacher, if they see you practicing well, studying, reflecting, and meditating, they will truly be delighted, because their purpose is to help all beings find happiness, and the only way to real happiness is through the Dharma. I'm also very happy this time. Why is that? Because this time, besides our Dharma friends here in the valley, there are also some people who, whether it was to me personally or to the academy, have truly shown kindness, and now they too have the opportunity to listen to the Dharma. Whenever I meet them, I also feel very grateful. They have helped me in many ways. There are such situations. But if just feeling grateful in my heart or simply saying thank you, this can't really repay their kindness. From a worldly perspective, such kindness cannot be repaid. But I think after truly receiving the Dharma teachings, from my perspective as a practitioner, the Dharma teachings that I share are those passed down from lineage gurus, and they are pure and without error. Of course, there may be minor mistakes, not just for me, but for anyone who is an ordinary being. There will inevitably be some errors in what they say. No one can guarantee otherwise. But what I mean is, if someone gains benefit from the Dharma, that is the truest benefit of all. Sometimes when I visit cities, meeting people in crowds and exchanging pleasantries doesn't really bring any true benefit. Aside from some material or other kinds of help, these are not ultimate benefits for them. So what is true benefit? I believe that in this world, the greatest benefit is the benefit that comes from the Dharma. So I think, as for the benefit of the Dharma, from every perspective, Dharma offerings are the most supreme. With Dharma offerings, there's no resentment or conflict. But with material offerings, people are often like this. At first, when the relationship is good, you're eager to make offerings to this teacher, that tulku or that Khenpo. But after a while, when some time has passed, if the worldly relationship falls apart, people start to criticize each other, and I don't think that's good. With Dharma offerings, the teacher is happy in the moment, and there's nothing to worry about later on. There's no conflict or hurt in this process. So everyone should focus on making Dharma offerings to their gurus. I believe Dharma offerings are extremely important. As we just discussed in daily life, when you encounter something pleasing like beautiful mountains or various wonderful worldly scene, you should visualize making the offerings in your mind. I believe that to make a habit of offering anytime, anywhere is extremely important for us as Mahayana practitioners. These days, some great masters abroad, when giving teachings, often emphasize karma and the principles behind making offerings. We should take these teachings and principles to heart and use them to improve ourselves. In this way, we will definitely find great benefit and support. So whenever we visit different places, especially those beautiful places we just talked about, we shouldn't let our body, speech, and mind be occupied by meaningless thoughts or actions. The first thing we should do is to mindfully offer these sites to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, and then make aspirations. In the past, His Holiness would always make aspirations and recite offering prayers whenever he visited sacred mountains or the sea. He never missed an opportunity to do so. So in our daily lives, we should use the verses from the King of Aspiration prayers to make offerings. If you don't know any mantras or prayers, just recite offering to the 3 jewels, offering to the 3 jewels. These 4 words, everyone knows how to recite them. If we make a habit of this in our daily lives, then wherever we go, we can put it into practice. This is really important. We'll stop here for today.
Padmasambhava